The moment you visibly react, you lose something you cannot easily recover. A single emotional outburst drops your perceived competence by more than 2 points and invites 38% more interruptions from those around you. Observers lock this judgment in within milliseconds, and the reason it happens faster than you can prevent it begins with a 50-millisecond gap between two structures inside your brain. Inside the brain, a silent alarm sounds before a person even knows what's happening. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster deep in the temporal lobe, acts as the body's early warning system. It scans for threat, insult, or social danger, reacting to negative cues in as little as 30 to 50 milliseconds. This is faster than the blink of an eye, so fast that conscious thought hasn't had time to catch up. In that first split second, the amygdala triggers a chain reaction, a surge of adrenaline, a tightening of facial muscles, a subtle widening of the pupils, skin conductance rises, heart rate quickens, and a micro-expression flashes across the face. The body prepares to defend, even if the mind hasn't formed a plan. These signals, though fleeting, are picked up by observers with uncanny speed. Studies using high-speed cameras and eye tracking show that others can detect a micro-expression or a tremor in less than 50 milliseconds, often without realizing it themselves. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for deliberate control and rational thought, lags behind. Its regulatory circuits begin to engage only after the amygdala's alarm has already fired. Researchers describe this as a neural gap, a brief window where impulse overrides intention. In that gap, the first signs of emotional reactivity become visible. For Alex, whose brain serves as our animation model, this means the amygdala lights up with activity before the prefrontal brake can even get into gear. The sequence is automatic. The amygdala detects, the body reacts, and only then does the prefrontal cortex attempt to regain control. This is why the first flare of emotion, a raised eyebrow, a sharp intake of breath, a flash of anger or embarrassment, often escapes before a person can choose their response. It's not a matter of willpower, but of biology. The observable cues that signal vulnerability or loss of composure are released in that 50-millisecond window, long before conscious regulation can intervene. This neural choreography underpins every visible reaction, making the first emotional signal both involuntary and, in social terms, deeply consequential. The rest of the brain's regulatory machinery will try to catch up, but by then, the signal has already been sent and received. Alex sits in a conference room, the meeting in full swing. A tense exchange unfolds. As Alex's jaw tightens and a flash of irritation crosses their face, the group's attention shifts. In that instant, an invisible process takes hold, one that psychologists call anchoring. The first visible sign of emotion becomes the reference point for how everyone will interpret Alex's authority for the rest of the meeting. Observers unconsciously lock on to these early cues. Solomon Asch's classic studies showed that the first trait people notice, whether warmth, composure, or agitation, anchors their entire impression. Once Alex's frustration is on display, colleagues begin to update their mental estimate. Is Alex still in control? How much influence does Alex have right now? The consequences are not just theoretical. In a controlled workplace study, managers who displayed a flash of anger or visible distress were rated an average of 2.3 points lower on a 10-point competence scale compared to those who kept a steady demeanor. The impact rippled through group dynamics. Interruptions of the visibly reactive manager rose by 38%. Eye tracking revealed a sharp increase in gaze aversion. Colleagues looked away more often, signaling discomfort and a subtle withdrawal of respect. These effects are immediate and quantifiable. The moment Alex's emotional reaction escapes, the group's perception of their authority drops. Colleagues feel more licensed to interrupt, to challenge, or to steer the conversation. The visible cue becomes a social anchor, shaping every interaction that follows. Even if Alex regains composure, the initial impression lingers, altering how others listen, respond, and allocate power in the room. This anchoring effect operates in seconds, but its influence can last far longer. A single micro-expression or tremor can set the tone for an entire meeting, recalibrating the social hierarchy with surprising speed. In environments where power and credibility are constantly negotiated, these first flashes of emotion carry measurable weight. A sharp exchange between colleagues can shift the balance of a room in an instant. When Alex's voice tightens and a flash of irritation flickers across their face, the group's focus narrows. Micro-expressions, fleeting signals that last less than 40 milliseconds, slip through before anyone can mask them. These subtle cues quietly lower Alex's authority, and interruptions soon follow. Across offices, a single visible reaction can reorder the hierarchy, often without a word. In relationships, a flash of anger or distress changes the dynamic. One partner's impulsive reaction prompts the other to scan for weakness. Afterward, cortisol lingers in both their systems for hours, making it harder to reconnect. The partner who keeps their cool becomes the emotional anchor, while the one who reacts is seen as less dependable, even if their feelings were justified. Social pressure amplifies these effects. In a tense debate or during public speaking, a tremor in the voice or a sudden flush can tip the crowd's perception. Crowd psychology shows that people gravitate toward those who appear steady. A momentary slip can trigger shifting alliances and a quiet loss of support. In each setting, the limbic system can override the prefrontal cortex 40% of the time in crowds and 25% in pairs, reshaping trust and social standing long after the moment passes. Suppressing emotion is not the same as controlling it. When a person tries to hide their feelings, clamping down on anger or forcing a neutral face, the body does not simply comply. Research by Gross and John shows that suppression keeps the sympathetic nervous system on high alert. Skin conductance and heart rate stay elevated, even as the outward display goes blank. The mind is forced to split its attention, one part monitoring the mask and the other still wrestling with the internal surge. This hidden struggle drains working memory and leaves the person feeling fatigued, not powerful. In contrast, true regulation involves naming and reframing the emotion. Studies led by Matthew Lieberman found that simply labeling a feeling, saying "I am frustrated," can lower amygdala activity by about 30%. This act of putting words to emotion recruits the prefrontal cortex and shifts the brain's response from alarm to analysis. The physiological wave recedes, and the person regains clarity. Alex demonstrates this in real time. When tension rises, Alex pauses and silently names the feeling. Next, a slow breath, 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. This paced breathing, shown in clinical trials to increase heart rate variability, signals the body to stand down. The visible result is composure, not suppression, a calm that others read as self-possession and authority. Over time, these small acts of regulation build a reputation for steadiness under pressure, while the habit of hiding emotion only deepens internal stress and erodes credibility. Alex sits at the head of the table, the meeting's tension still hanging in the air. A pointed question lands, one that, moments ago, would have triggered a visible reaction. Instead, Alex lets the silence hold for a breath. The group waits. There is a subtle shift. Instead of tightening their jaw or raising their voice, Alex quietly names the feeling inside: frustration, but also determination. A slow inhale, a longer exhale. The physiological surge that once threatened to spill over is met with deliberate control. Alex's eyes remain steady. The voice, when it comes, is measured and clear. "Let's clarify the issue," Alex says, redirecting focus to the facts. The room responds in kind. Interruptions fade. Colleagues lean in, recalibrating their impression. The earlier flash of irritation becomes background noise, replaced by a sense of calm authority. Where power had slipped, it now returns, not through force, but through composure. This pause and reframe approach does more than restore order. It signals to everyone present that Alex is not ruled by the room's volatility, but able to shape it. The conversation continues, but the balance has changed. Influence is no longer determined by the first emotional slip, but by the visible mastery over what comes next. In that moment, the room recognizes a different kind of strength, the kind that endures, quietly, in the face of pressure. In a world where perception shapes reality, composure is often mistaken for strength, and rewarded as such. Today, influence is granted not to the loudest, but to those who remain deliberate under pressure. The power to respond, not react, is still the rarest advantage. Thanks for watching.